Thank you very much. What a great audience we have for the very first show that we have taped this year in 2021. And how many of us are looking forward to 2021 being very different than 2020? Anybody? Okay. Not that it has been so far. I mean, this has been a tough week for America. It has been an embarrassing and disgusting week for those of us who believe that the recent presidential election was tainted with some unanswered questions about fraud and massive voting irregularities. But whatever hopes we had that there might be a sincere investigation into the evidence that the media claimed didn't exist got wiped out by a hot-headed mob at our nation's capital. Now, to be clear, of the tens of thousands of protesters and demonstrators who descended on Washington, most really were peaceful, law-abiding patriots who loved God, their families, and their country. But those who stormed our nation's capital, ignored and fought the police, broke windows and doors, and vandalized the offices of members of Congress and the Capitol itself, they weren't patriots. They were a mob, a violent, lawless, and reckless mob engaged in criminal acts. Some of those participating in this mayhem, or who tried to defend it, somehow tried to compare the actions of the mob to those of our founders in the American Revolution. Let me be very clear. The violence at the Capitol this week was not at all like the American Revolution. I mean, the Revolution of 1776 was carefully thought out. It was meticulously planned and carried out by people who had exhausted all avenues to peacefully secure their liberty and to rid themselves of the intolerable behavior of their mother country, England. They declared their independence in a carefully crafted document, and they pledged their lives, fortunes, and sacred honor. They didn't act spontaneously or compulsively. Their actions were thoroughly contemplated, and the consequences were fully understood. What happened this week was carried out by some hot-headed people who were moved by raw rage. There was no rational consideration of the consequences. Now look, there are no excuses or explanations for endangering innocent people, destroying public property, and challenging the authority of law enforcement. And even if 95% of that crowd were God-fearing, law-abiding citizens who are rightfully angry that their beloved republic is being taken over by Marxists and the useful idiots in the media who follow along, there's still no justification for the mayhem. Some of the writers even quoted Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., but Dr. King never got so fed up with the horrible and unjust treatment by the government that he said, okay, that's it. Let's storm the Capitol and break windows and occupy the chamber. The American Revolution indeed became violent. It resulted in a war. But they weren't a mob who in a blind rage launched something they had no plan to fulfill. They articulated their grievances. They requested relief. And only after all possible remedies were rebuffed did they declare their independence. We've got to be the voice of reason and rationality. Quite frankly, the mob set back the conservative, patriotic cause of limited government and a government that provides justice equally. This angry mob played right into the hands of the press and the left. Let me be clear, I support the many policies that President Trump has implemented to put America first. I'm so glad he stood up to China and Russia. He brought manufacturing jobs back to America. He did it. He cut taxes because, quite frankly, he believed that you could spend the money you worked for better than the government could. He fought to protect the lives of unborn children. He protected religious liberty. He stood with Israel against those who sought to annihilate her. And he appointed constitutionalists to the courts. He also got us a vaccine in a time frame that all of his critics said could never happen, but he did it. Now, I don't blame him for what happened, because maybe there were some people who supported him, and they devolved into criminal activity and tried to take over the nation's capital. But to be fair and honest, some of his language about the election being stolen might have cost us 2 Senate seats in Georgia, and it gave some the false sense that it was justifiable to storm past the police barricades and take over the Capitol. Well, Joe Biden will be the next president, Let me be clear, it is not who I voted for. I know that's a big surprise to a lot of people. But I'm not going to burn down the country because he's president. I'm going to speak out for my views. I'll faithfully vote in every election, and I will work to ensure that our elections are honest and trustworthy. But as disgusted as I was when Black Lives Matter and Antifa followers were burning our cities, looting stores, and attacking police officers, I'm equally disgusted when people who may share many of my views do the same thing. I don't care what their politics are. They're lawless thugs, and they've got to be found, charged, and prosecuted. Here's the simple truth. I can't teach my children and grandchildren to obey the rules of my house if I can't be trusted to obey the laws of my own nation. Now, if you want more videos like that one, hit the subscribe button below and the notification bell right next to it. And if you leave a comment, positive or negative, I'll be sure that my dog Toby sees it and responds to you in kind.